Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 Nerds by Nerds, hanging out with.
Ted.
Today we continue our series of why 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons needs Eberron. Today we're talking about the Artificers.
Hey, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So our latest edition of why Eberron needs, why 5th edition needs Eberron, not the other way around.
Eberron needs 5th edition too.
Yeah, it's a symbiosis. Symbiotes, which is another cool thing in Eberron, but we're not going to get into that today.
Artificers.
Artificer, yes. They're basically magical bards. Well, not magical bards, because bards are already magical, but magic item bards or creation bards.
Exactly. And Artificer is kind of where... Or Eberron is where Artificer started, right?
Yes, absolutely. There was no Artificer before Eberron in Dungeons and Dragons.
So the Artificer is a really great class, and we do have a 5th edition version, but it's definitely more nuanced in this book.
Well, yeah. Well, the rules are much more nuanced in 3rd edition, and you even commented on going back on how much gamier that edition was.
Right. Now, in this book, the Artificer was a class that could literally use every single type of magic item, and eventually got the ability to create everything. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter that you need to be a druid to use this or a cleric to make that. I got this.
Yeah. Well, a key function of the Artificer is using the use magic device skill,
right?
Which is very much a part of their character class, and a lot of some other classes could get access to it, but it was very limited number that could actually get it as a class skill in the previous edition. But the Artificer, the class was almost built around it, because that was the whole idea, is an Artificer just uses magic. To them, it's not arcane, it's not divine, it's just magic. It's like electricity, right? they don't care where it actually comes from or how it's being generated. Whether it's a combustible engine or it's being harnessed from the sun, whatever. They just deal with the thing that's the end result, which is the electricity.
The energy. They just I'm going to take this and I'm going to do something with it.
In previous editions, it was built right into the game to build magic items. And Artificers very much had that aspect as their character class, where before you would have to basically expend your experience points, your life energy, into creating items. The Artificer actually had a pool where they just got to expend X amount of XP from every level.
And not only that, but they could take an item that wasn't being used by someone in the party, and they could just be like, all right, I'm just going to suck the energy out of this.
And
add that to a pool that they could be like, all right, well, now I'm going to use that, and I'm going to go and make something new. Look at this.
They were magic item smiths. Absolutely. But not only that, they had the ability to imbue magic into items temporarily.
Right.
Via infusions. So they were very much like spellcasters, except for it took them much longer to perform their magic. But basically, it's like these items could hold a charge, and then you would use them when you needed them and when you wanted them.
Now, would they be able to infuse an item and then say, here you go?
Yes. Yeah, so, that was a big part of what they would do.
So it's like, all right, well, I don't want to go into danger. Here, there's that thing over there. Here's one for you. Here's one for you. Here's one for you.
It's very much
take care of it.
It's very much what they wanted to do, because they're very much more of a support character.
Right.
Than they don't want to be on the front line, and at the same time they generally didn't have the heavy artillery of a wizard or sorcerer or even a cleric, unless they had items that had those spells in them.
Right.
That being said, they can mimic nearly any class with they're like the Batman of character classes.
They really are.
Giving enough time and preparation, they could be ready to do whatever they needed to. They had find traps, which was like a rogue feature,
skill,
but because they're used to tinkering with stuff. The two most important attributes or ability scores for an Artificer in Eberron were intelligence and charisma. And one might even argue that the charisma was actually more important than the intelligence.
Right.
Because a lot of their castings weren't going to deal with, a modifier. It wasn't going to be affected by that higher stat.
Right.
But in the previous edition, you did have to have a certain minimum stat in order to cast spells. for them in their case, that only went up to 6th level. So if you had a 16 intelligence, that was enough.
Yeah, you're good.
Where charisma was you used your use magic device, so you basically would use your force of will, your force of personality, to trick the items into thinking you met whatever requirements that were there. So that actually became a much more important skill set for them.
I agree. Now, the Artificer also was one of the few who actually had the repair skill, which is what was used to cure or fix constructs and items, which falls into the actual Warforged race. Because as counted as constructs, Warforged, if you cast Cure Light Wounds or any of the cure spells on them, they only got half of what the effect was, but they got the full effect of any repair spells that were done. And that was one of their primary things. So if you got a Warforged in your party, you really want an Artificer along.
Right, yeah, like we had already talked briefly. We've done a couple videos about dragon marked houses and the races of Eberron. Well, yeah, you either want a artificer in your party if you have a warforged in your party, or if you're a warforged, you might want to be an artificer. They're one of the races that kind of excel at it, even though they don't really have the stats for it, but they have an affinity for stuff because they are stuff. They have an affinity for the constructs. Or you wanted to have someone from House Cannith in your party that was dragon marked. So at least there was somebody with access to healing that specifically would affect your warforged in the party. But there's a lot of good reasons to play an artificer in Eberron, especially like if you like being that support character, if you like having that jack of all trades kind of feel to your character, because they literally could do pretty much everything.
Or if you wanted to play the kind of character who was like, all right, my DM doesn't always give the specific magic items that I want, so I just want to be able to make the things that I want. That's what you want to do. You can just go to it and make whatever it is that you want, and you've got that power within your grasp.
So the other races that are actually make good artificers would be dwarves, gnomes, and humans. Humans just because they're very versatile and they don't have any real attachments per se as a species, as a race. Individuals might. So that really works really well with the idea of being an artificer, where you just see the different components of magic and you just slap them together however you see fit. Where the dwarf and a gnome, they already have an affinity for
they make
crafting
stuff
and making things. Yes.
So even if you say, okay, well, you have to make the thing yourself. Well, they already know how to do it, as opposed to like, well, I'm going to pay somebody else to make it, and then I'll enchant it. No, you just like, all right, from start to finish, this is my project. I'm doing this.
Yeah, and as kind of seen in the 5th edition version of the Artificer, they do have the ability to make constructs at a certain level. They would be able to make a homunculus, and they would actually they have cooler ones in here than just the one in the monster manual. Right. So they have different options. Well, 5th edition they came up with something, and which is actually even cooler than the homunculus, and actually even better than the ones in here, just because it was very versatile what you could come up with. The biggest difference being like you can only make one, and that you just got that one, so that you kind of have that like pet build. And the other thing is, the artificers had the unique ability to take what were called meta magic feats in 3rd edition, which used to be the purview of the wizard, not the sorcerer, and that was the ability to kind of like change magic. Well, they could use that with things like staves and wands, and they would they would be able to alter those spells, which was unique to the game, really.
So those are some brief points on how awesome the Artificer is. Let us know if you think there's anything out there we missed in the comments down below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can become a Patreon over on Patreon.
So until next time, stay nerdy.